I'm Christina Morgan-Meldrum, and I've been in the management consultant in change for a really long time. 30 years, I think we've worked it out each, haven't we? So,
Yes.
And interestingly, we have Jen and I will have very parallel kind of experiences in going through stuff out. If you looked at our maps of our lives, kind of like cross over quite a few times in different things. I like change because I love doing something different. I love going from a place that you've not been before and kind of working out how to get there and weaving all of the things that I find interesting and fascinating to go through to get there. My business is called In Cahoots because I believe that if you work together and collaborate, then you get a much better result than having one particular brain being applied. So I really like the ability to collaborate, which is kind of an example of this right here now.
Exactly.
Is that we're collaborating together on this particular adventure on Change Crash Investigators. That's the adventure that we're embarking on to share some crashes or near crashes.
Yeah, and I'm Jen, as Christina mentioned. My business is called Axiology Group. I've also been in change for just over 30 years. Really started out in that project space and kind of stayed there. I get bored really quickly, as Christina knows. So project life suits me, and have just seen a lot of good stuff, but also a lot of not great stuff. And we thought we would bring all of that collective experience to Change Crash Investigators to learn from those mistakes and hopefully help you learn from ours and other people's that have gone before us, and bring that to life so that you can learn from it and you can have some fun and while you learn, but also apply those lessons learned before you experience a change crash.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is really interesting about this process is there's a bit of a validation that happens when Jen and I talk through some of the experiences, and sometimes it can be quite lonely. You could be a lonely voice talking about how not to do something or how not to maybe avoid or to avoid this particular thing that's going to happen if you let it happen. It can feel a little bit lonely sometimes when you're the only voice that's there saying something different, and it's good to be able to have somebody with Jen's experience to be able to share and kind of validate, oh yeah, that is kind of not okay, or that is completely okay, that's exactly the right path to do. So I find that helps as well.
Yeah, and we love to bounce ideas off of each other and have fun while we do it. So hopefully you have fun in the process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Ready to roll. Hey, welcome to Change Crash Investigators. Doom, doom, doom. The intention of this is to investigate some change crashes or near crashes so that we can learn from them. We know that organisations embarking on change, they're moving into unknown territory. So this is not intended to shame anybody or diminish them. We know that that is actually really tricky. But it's about looking for those mistakes that might have happened and what learnings we can make so that you can anticipate those and not make those mistakes. Might be completely other mistakes you make, but not those mistakes, because we want to have better change so that you get better business performance out of it. So that's the reason for Change Crash Investigators. Why we're doing it, and we'll introduce each other in a second, is we want to help you identify when you've got some change and trouble and take some action to get it back on track. Want to leverage kind of I feel like it's longer than 25. It's like closer to 30, isn't it?
It's a long time, yeah.
Yeah, a long time. The long amount of knowledge that both Jen and I have to make that available to a wider audience. We want to share some stories with amazing people as we go through this process, and it's going to be fun.
It's going to be really fun.
Some change crashes are just downright hilarious, so we will have some fun talking about those. So, I'm Christina Morgan-Meldrum. As I mentioned, I've been doing change for a very long time. I'm part of my company is called In Cahoots, which is around collaborating. My kind of core is about helping you make sense of a little bit of chaos, adding a bit of order to it, and kind of helping you understand exactly how that works. But I like to do that a little bit of creatively and a little bit kind of fun. So that's kind of my background.
And I'm Jen Zuber. I run Axiology Group, and Axiology is a small consulting firm. We focus on large-scale change delivery as well as capability uplift. So I spend a lot of my time in the training environment, helping people learn, coaching, and all that sort of stuff around change portfolio management, change management accreditation, human-centered design. What else? Psychological safety. Pretty much anything you want to learn about that kind of touches on the change space. I'm happy to work with you and run some training and learning programs with you around that, or coaching and mentoring. But really, more importantly, I think for me, this is, as Christina said, it's going to be a fun way to learn. I think there's no better way to learn than from other people's mistakes, because storytelling connects with our brain. We make sense of change and we make sense of learnings through stories, and I think that this is going to be a really interesting way to kind of unpack what is change management for people who are new to the field, or people who just want to, again, just have some fun and go, oh, I remember that one. We won't name anybody, but you might recognize some scenarios, probably because change crash scenarios are quite similar across industries and different organizations. But yeah, so that's why we're here, and that's why I'm here, and that's who I am, and that's who Christina is.
Yay!
Here we go.
So are we ready to embark on our first change crash?
Let's go.
All right, introduce the
All right, I'll introduce it. So what we thought we would start with is an ERP implementation, because ERPs are pretty universal. Most organizations at some stage of their lifespan do one and then are on an upgrade path after that. But really, I think what I've encountered lately is organizations doing re-implementations of ERPs. So I was around, and as I say, I cut my teeth in change in ERPs in the late 90s, early 2000s. And what I'm starting to see is that corporate memory is forgotten, and people are starting to make the same mistakes as they made back in the mid 90s. And there was some really fascinating, terrifying, but fascinating court cases that happened, especially in the US, around the mid to late 90s, that came out of the big ERP implementations. And what I would love to see is that we don't make those mistakes, but I'm starting to see some organizations venture into that space. So I thought, why not start with something that's universal?
Yeah.
One might call it core.
Cool, absolutely.
And is applicable across industry, across organization type, but also applicable to kind of any large scale change. But an ERP is a great way to learn that. And what do I mean by ERP? Enterprise Resource Planning System.
Yeah. So any kind of core application, really. So it could be the HR application, it could be a finance application, it could be the sales application, like it could be any, and most times it's all of them, just in a sequence sort of way. So yeah, any kind of core, which is why this episode is called Core. Application that's kind of core to your business. So
really interesting across different organization types working in higher education. For instance, I've taken these same principles, I've applied it into research management, I've applied it to curriculum management, I've applied it to operating model. So kind of everything that is applicable to ERP is applicable to any large scale change. So you said customer systems, CRMs, those sorts of things as well.
Yeah, and similar. So in education environments, in sort of community environments, in large financial services, new media, lots of places do core replacement of systems. So it is like a universal kind of thing that at some point you're going to have to do that if you're of any size of business. Even small businesses though. Yeah. They might be using a particular software that helps them do something, and then that software needs to be upgraded or moved. So it's a nice one to kick off because it's applicable across the board.
Yeah, universal
core. Rightio. Have you got any, and this will be anonymous, so nobody will be named or shamed as part of the process, but have you got any kind of key things you want to sort of kick us off with?
Sure. So
core things, baby.
in preparation, did a little online search and went, what are the major case studies, learnings from change management disasters in enterprise resource planning implementations, and it came back with up to, I would say, 30 years of content that it had delivered back to me. And what I started to unpack there was some consistencies. There was obviously sometimes maybe the wrong software systems integrator was selected, bad project management, for instance. But those aside, focusing on the change management aspects of it, there was some commonality amongst all of those. And it wasn't specific to a particular systems integrator, it wasn't specific to a specific software, and it wasn't specific to a region or a country, but
or even an industry.
Exactly. They were all people kind of related, and a lot of the learnings out of that I thought would be interesting to talk about.
One of the ones that Jen's triggered in my mind is this is the place where human-centered design really does have a key role. Because you're going to have to invent your processes, reinvent your processes, change your processes anyway, to satisfy the needs of the new application. And it's a really good opportunity to sort of really delve into that a little bit. And a missed opportunity often, I find, is to kind of use a little bit of that human-centered design, kind of step back and work out how we should do something.
It's really interesting, right? Because I think back to, the late 90s, early 2000s when I was working in this space, and that's kind of all I did was back then was ERP implementations.
We would gun in it.
I know, right? We used to run this thing called a conference room pilot, and now we would probably call it a human-centered design or a co-design workshop. But that conference room pilot, we would put everybody in that room and we would say, this is what the system looks like. How can you see your processes working around this? And we would very early in the process, before we even kind of got to that requirements gathering piece, we would say, this is what the system does off the shelf generically. How does that work with your day-to-day? And that's where we would start to then unpack, okay, therefore, what are the requirements? Okay, therefore, what are the change impacts? What's the training gap going to be? What's that gap analysis? And our focus was more on the gap analysis rather than the change impact assessment, because we kind of knew everything's going to be impacted from structure to roles to KPIs to processes to learning. Everything is going to be impacted. But what's the gap? What's the delta between where they operate now and where they need to operate in the future? And sitting the specialists, the accounts payable specialist or the payroll specialist or the HR specialist in the room and saying, this is what it looks like. How is this going to work with your day to day? They would tell us. They would see it. So it wasn't up. We weren't manifesting it ourselves as a change people. It was actually coming from those subject matter experts, and from there we could then say, well, therefore this is what the change plan needs to be.
And those sessions are also really helpful in kind of uncovering or unearthing some of the organizational history, ghosts, whatever it might be from the past, like from change past, of ghosts get out. But even just kind of the way people relate to each other in those workshops, who gets a voice, who doesn't get a voice, who is kind of going, I'm not changing anything about the way that I do things, to somebody that's a little bit of, like, all of that kind of gets surfaced there, just like a perfect little microcosm of kind of getting some real juice out of, like, how is this organization going to cope with this?
Yeah, absolutely. And they go, but what about this form or that workflow or this approver? Or, for that department, it always has to go to this person first. And you kind of pick up all those practices, those work practices that have morphed and changed that aren't written down over time. And from there, you really get a feel for, well, this is all the stuff that actually we have to unpack, and this is all the stuff that we need to change over in order for this new system to work.
And it's also a really good opportunity. The subject matter experts aren't always the people that might be change champions. Sometimes they're kind of like used interchangeably, but that's not always the case that there's a direct correlation. So it's also helpful to kind of see, what's kind of coming out, what sort of stuff, and who out of that group might be change champion, but who also just might be the person that's just going to get right under the covers of the system and work out exactly everything that's going to work, and it will remain subject matter expert. Not necessarily a change champion, but a subject matter expert. So
it's an interesting delineation, right, between the two, that change champion who could be an advocate out there versus a subject matter expert who get under the covers and really I say break the system, right? Like testing is about breaking the system, and how can that
the testers love
right? The testers love it, and then
break it.
And that's the whole point, right? Because you want to break it before it goes live, so that you're going live with something that's already fixed, not breaking it after it's been implemented. I want to touch on something you touched on earlier. So you had mentioned process early on, right? And one of the things that was kind of happening around the time, this, late 90s, early 2000s, when these lawsuits were going through the courts, is they were unpacking that people were only trained on their sliver of the process. And they didn't understand the whole end-to-end process. And what that was doing was they're going, well, doesn't matter. I'm just going to
look it over the line.
Just do my bit or not do my bit. And then, but not understanding the impact that had. Yeah. So, for instance, there was, supply chain as part of finance ERP as an example. And the supply chain, they didn't like using the system, the purchase managers, for instance, and they were going around, the process and using their corporate credit card to buy supplies. What was happening was then accounts payable couldn't reconcile, they couldn't then on charge the customer, and then the whole kind of process broke down from there. There's examples of people not following the process and they couldn't get goods out the door, as an example. So one of the main learnings from those early ERP implementations was you have to not just train people on their process, but say this is how you fit into the whole end-to-end process. And this is what happens if you don't follow the process. So they could really connect what mattered to them, but into what mattered to the whole organization.
Yeah. And even both sides of that, so the input and the output. So making sure that you're really kind of clear about what information do I need to be able to do my job well. So therefore the people, team that's ahead of that. And then also what do I need to provide for the people that's downstream for me that also helps with that. Plus I think just organisationally it's helpful for someone to know, this is how it works, from kind of end to end. There's some organisations that I've gone in and I just honestly don't know how they make money. So I get them to kind of tell me how you make money because it's not really clear. Like if you're selling a product then that's fine. But there is other businesses that are just a little bit like, that's confusing. So how do you make money? So sometimes just understanding that.
Let's jump into transformation. What does transformation mean?
Okay. So do we want to finish with core and do transformation?
No, I want to connect it
Connect
back.
the two. Yeah. Okay, cool. Nice. Yeah. Nice too.
Yeah. Do you want to ask me? Do you want to?
Sure. Often ERP replacements are deemed transformation. What's your view on that?
I could wax lyrical about
You could.
Change versus transformation. I think when you're implementing an ERP for the first time, absolutely, right? It's transformation. It impacts everything from structure, process, team handoff points, workflow. Oftentimes you're putting in shared service centers attached to that. You're centralizing teams as an example. You might be outsourcing also as an example. There's a lot of training. Right. Yeah. Like all that. Yeah, that is actual transformation.
Yeah.
I often run into people and they go, what are you working on? I'm working on a finance transformation. Oh, great. So you're putting it in? No, we're upgrading, one system to the same system. It's just a different version. And I'm like, okay. Are you changing structure, process? No, we're just upgrading. I'm like,
not a transformation.
No. So I think the word transformation can spark fear in people because we have this bias of all the changes that we've encountered in our lives before we've gotten here. Yeah. And if it's not been great, we bring that with us. So I think transformation, when it's overused, we'll say, for any change, is not great because of the inherent scare factor that it brings. And I think an upgrade, like for like, one version to the next version, change, absolutely. Transformation, no. If it's a re-implementation, so you're going, let's say, from SAP to Workday, or PeopleSoft to SAP, or Oracle to SAP, absolutely, because that's a whole
different way.
It's a whole different system. It's a different model and everything like that. But my advice is just be careful of what you call it.
The other thing that I think is interesting about that is I actually think that the transformation title is more to make the person that's doing the work feel better and more important.
That's great.
Then it's actually the real facts on the ground. And to your point, it raises fear and those people are actually experiencing the change. But just be plainer about it. Like if it's just an upgrade, it's just an upgrade. Don't try and big note yourself if you're doing something kind of amazing. There's plenty of work in that. So it's not like, it's not an easy thing to do, but just take your ego out of it. This is about what they're going to experience. Call yourself whatever you like outside on LinkedIn and in your resume, but, call it what it is.
Yeah. I think it's also connected to the budget factor as well, right? So if you look at an ERP implementation
from, it's a completely different system that you're implementing, or you're moving, not just purely an upgrade. Like the percentage of change management investment needs to be higher, because you're retraining, you're redesigning processes, you're running all those human-centered design style co-design workshops. You should definitely be thinking of putting in a digital adoption platform, because you can't train everybody in the classroom on and expect them to remember. The science tells us that, right? So putting in digital, like, that costs money, that digital adoption platform, the staff that you need to write the new processes, for instance, or the resources that you need to, run the training and the communication and the co-design and everything like that. So that kind of like magic 10% factor around an ERP implementation is relevant when you look at the change management budget. And sometimes I feel like people whack the word transformation on because they're like, oh, that justifies the budget, but actually the benefits realization should justify the budget, and what's the return on investment that you're trying to get, and not what we're calling it. But yeah, when you think about like what should go into the makeup of that, right? It's everything from the cost of the DAP, the digital adoption platform. There's a couple, big ones out there on the market. There's some smaller ones that are entering the market or in a couple of years. And they're fantastic because they save you money in the long run.
They do.
They also, they help you identify where you have difficulties or snafus in the actual system itself, and you can use it to automate stuff. You can use it to do that deep analysis on what's working, what's not working, where people are getting stuck, where they might need more learning interventions, where the process is getting caught up,
and even when the process is not fully, like, it's not fully finished either, so it helps them go, I don't have to remember that I've got to go this one and then this one.
Correct.
While you're in that process of transition, it can do that for me.
It does it for them. Yeah, absolutely. But they've got to invest in getting that right.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So you can't just plug it in and go, it's going to magically work. You've got to put the information into it. So thinking about like what is the actual staffing that you need, the resourcing that you need to be able to code your DAP appropriately, and make sure that your processes are redesigned, and the communication and all the engagement that needs to happen around it.
It reminded me of one of the other things that I think is kind of important, which is annoying sometimes for the systems integrator, but too bad, get over it, is showcases. Because just because you've gone through it and explained it and we think we understand it, the way that it actually translates to when they see it in practice is always very different. Like, there's the theory that there's kind of three processes. There's the documented process, there's the process that is actually in practice, and then there's another process which I can't remember what the other process is, but there's always never like here is the one way that everyone's going to do it. It could be the exceptions you talked about, so it could be like except for that team, team does it this way, or this particular circumstance it's done this way. So when they see it, when you walk through and showcase it, that's when they go, oh no, because of this or this or this or this, that's not going to work, which is super valuable. And I've had many systems integrators tell me, can you please stop bringing the customer in? And I'm like, no, shall not stop.
No. And what we know, right, like what we know from neuroscience is our brains need those kind of micro steps to understand the change. We need to be able to see something, celebrate it, understand it, unpack it, take a rest off of it, come back to it. And that repeated showcasing lets us learn step by step by step, and it builds up the understanding as we go over time, so that you're not just going, 18, hey, we're launching an ERP, and 18 months later, hey, it's now live, and people are going, what happened in the last 18 months? You're actually bringing people along on that journey, and the neuroscience tells us that giving them those showcases actually is a way for them to chunk down the learning and reiterate and build it up in their brain, so that when they go to use it, and hopefully you've got that digital adoption platform in place to support them, they're not trolling back over 18 months of memory, but it's much more recent if it's a showcase or a learning event that they've been on, or even a co-design workshop that they've been on, but they've built that knowledge up over time, so it's not a surprise when they go to use the system.
Yeah, definitely. Because some of them can be dramatically different from what they're used to, so poles apart. So if somebody hasn't been involved in that process, they can get a real shock when they look at it for the first time, especially some of the way that they're designed, and I'm not going to talk about any particular ones, but they can be like industrial strength, and that can be very overwhelming if your platform was not that sort of, was a custom built in somebody's back shed, to kind of look at these, and then there's all of these fields that you may not need, but they're trying to do a vanilla implementation. So there's lots of reasons why you want to be able to chunk that up to be able to help them get just across it and familiar with it, and kind of it doesn't become that massive shock where they're like, oh, there's no way I'm going to be able to get across this.
It breaks it down.
Yeah.
Helps break it down for them, and
it takes
lowers that
the
barrier.
fear away, the uncertainty away from it as well, because I get to see it. I might not necessarily get to touch it, although the earlier you can do that, the better, is what I always say.
Yeah.
But just it gives them that sort of sense about what it is. So instead of it being, I'm never going to be able to get my head across this is going to be really complicated, they can go, oh yeah, no, okay, get it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So it kind of helps along the way, for sure.
Yeah. One of, I think, the kind of muscle memories that exist in organizations that we've forgotten is how hard it is the first time you do an ERP, right? Like, the organizations that I worked with in the early 2000s, they're now at the re-implementation, let's get a new vendor and do it again, kind of perspective. And they've gone, we've been on this journey for the last 20, 25 years. Like, we've got this. And I'm like, do you really? And they think of it as an upgrade like for like, and have forgotten that when they put in the ERP, they put in a shared service center. Over the last 20 years, they've decentralized and gone out to the masses, and processes have gone with it, right? And now they're going, well, let's put it in a new ERP, let's re-centralize, and they're forgetting how hard that is. And they're going, well, in our last upgrade, we didn't have a huge change budget because it's like for like you're upgrading the software but not massively changing your operating model. Whereas when you're re-implementing or putting in one for the first time, you do have to touch on the whole operating structure of the organization. And an ERP touches, like, we like to think of it as finance or HR or supply chain, but in reality, it touches everybody in the organization, and in one way, shape, or form. And forgetting how hard it was the first time is biting people in the bum.
Yeah, definitely. And then you're not going to get the benefits out of it. So that's the whole reason why people are trying to do these, is because either technology has moved on and they want to be able to take advantage of some of those features, or the costs are becoming prohibitive on a particular platform, they want to move to a different platform. There's a whole load of reasons why people would do it. So you want to make sure that you invest that time in them, because they are not fun. They are really hard work.
They're hard, but
Really
they
hard
can
work.
be really fun.
They can be
very
fun.
hard.
Yeah. So is there any kind of hilarious moments that may have happened through some ERP implementations? I can think of one, if that helps you.
You go first. Yeah.
So I know that this is focused on change and what we can do from a change perspective. But one of the things I think is the earlier you get involved, the better, including all the way back when you're actually doing the request for proposal or the RFT or the request for tender or whatever that process is, when you're doing that selection of the solutions integrator. Being involved right up front from a change perspective is really, really important. Some platforms are just clunkier and harder to get across than others. But the pitch that you'll get from a lot of these organisations is that they'll include change management in that, which often will mean they'll train somebody, undisclosed person, at an undisclosed time on what that platform looks like. So there's no specificity associated, there's no detail associated, they don't talk about what they're going to train them on, they don't talk about whether there's modules, they don't tell you whether there's any material they're going to share. Like, basically it's just, oh yes, and we do change management, which is never at all what you expect it to be. I've had one exception in the entire time that I've been working in this where they've actually done a really good job.
It's an absolutely great call out, right? Because I think when I've been involved in those RFPs, all the way through to negotiating the contracts, there's all these promises of we can provide training material and we can provide communication, but they don't know your organization.
No.
They don't know your processes. They don't know your people. They don't know your language, that the corporate language that works, for your organization. So absolutely take what they have generically and apply that.
If they give it to you at all.
If they give it to you at all,
they go, oh yeah, no, and then it's so generic.
Yeah.
It's useless.
Yeah. And I think then being able to then customize it, not the system, but customize the learning in a way that works for your people, I think is the most important thing to do.
So one of the most hilarious moments that I've done is probably not even this far. So imagine a petition, maybe a little bit longer, maybe just outside. Business, solutions integrator. That far apart, so it was pre-COVID. And the entire level of communication was via email. And I remember saying, I think we've got a problem here, Houston. If you can't even speak to the solutions integrator that are literally over the partition from you, then I think they're not the right solutions integrator. Now, that goes to the whole fallacy of, we've already spent all this money, we've invested all this time, blah, 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 blah. Get all of that. But these ERPs are multi-year often thing. We're like 6 months into that, probably 18 months, 2 year. And if you're not even talking, it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
So
one time I was brought in after the program was live, the ERP was live, and the systems integrator had been ushered away, and the organization was trying to deal with the implications of it. And I was brought in, and my title was my job title was Sentiments Manager. Because everybody was so ticked off. The whole organization was so ticked off with the state of the system and the processes, and they just couldn't do what they needed to do. Accounts weren't getting paid.
Goodness.
Paper wasn't getting ordered, like all that kind of stuff. People were using their Amex card for stationary orders and that kind of stuff to try to get around the system. So I had to go and interview 1,000 people and find out what they thought was broken, and it came back to they just didn't engage the humans, right? So they didn't do that co-design piece, they didn't do the learning piece, they didn't do the engagement piece. So for me, ERPs are so much more than just training and comms, right? Comms and training. It's everything from co-design, that understanding requirements, understanding the gaps, looking at your operating model. How are people rewarded and remunerated? What's the handoff points? What's the workflows? And then the training and comms that flows out of that. But also the embedding. How do you embed the behavior? Like if you're training finance, you might train them in July in an ERP and how to use everything to do with the ERP. They might not use the financial year end for another full 12 months. They're going to forget that. So how do you build that embedment? How do you build that into, for instance, digital adoption, and think about, what does that look like? What does that support need to look like on a long-term basis? So Sentiments Manager. That was my favorite title.
That's a fun one.
Yeah.
But that part of that role is really critical, because even the excuse sometimes, well, it's vanilla. We're doing a vanilla implementation. I get all the reasons why that is important, because from an upgrade path, it makes it much easier. So I totally understand that. But you still need to configure it. You still need to make changes to it so that it suits your environment. So there's still things that you need to do. So then saying it's vanilla, and it's the other one that I love is it's intuitive. It's so easy for people to use.
People just know how to use it.
It's like an iPhone. Oh my god, the amount of times it's like an iPhone. People just change up really quickly. Okay, no worries. Let's see how you go doing it. Give it a go. So you kind of need to still invest in that time about that familiarity, that growing comfortable with it, the micro-learning from a neuroscience perspective, that ability to just kind of reinforce and re-embed those lessons that they get through showcases, through process design, through all of the things that you do to kind of make that work. So training and comms is part of it.
The other thing that's just come to my mind, right, as you said, iPhone, right? So when we think about the first ERPs that were going in 25 years ago, we were on Nokia, not smart devices.
No.
The types of phones I don't even know if they're around anymore.
Yeah, you can still get them.
Right. So
when you want to detox
from the connected
world.
But the environment that those ERPs were implemented in was very different. Oftentimes that was the only change that was happening, right, in the organization. And now people are like, the amount of change is exponentially increasing every year, every day. The breadth and depth and complexity of what we face into at work is different, and I think our attention spans are just, we're tired. Like I hate the word fatigued, because I think it's all about getting fit for change rather than fatigue. But we are exhausted by poorly managed change.
Yeah.
Like we know that is a huge risk to organizations, and especially if you look at the new legislation in Australia around psychosocial health and poorly managed change. But if you look at where we were back then to where we are now, this is just one change in a drop many buckets of change that people are dealing with. So it's a different context now as well. And I think, we've learned those lessons. A lot of organizations learned that the real hard way, and there's almost like no excuse to get it wrong.
And then there's layers of change. So there's like multiple changes happening in the organization, and I'll let you do a bit of a pitch on your portfolio change in a sec. But there's that. But then just the level of change is just happening in your everyday environment as well. So, the AI, the tech moving, like there's so much that's happening just on every day. And then you've got life changes,
Yeah.
Children,
geopolitical,
adults, political, absolutely. Geopolitical, is wars, all of that sort of stuff. Like there's layers and layers and layers and layers of this that just grind you down.
Yeah. And our brains are amazing, complex things, but they haven't kept pace with societal change and the amount of change that we face into. So we're not wired for this volume, this pace, this complexity.
And a lot of the tools that we utilize for some of that stuff have got inbuilt technology into them that mean that they trick our reward system, our dopamine system into this is a good thing to scroll through, to update, to those sorts of things, which then depletes that really fundamental prefrontal cortex element to the point where it's got nothing left. And then you're going, here you go, get used to this new ERP.
Yeah, here you go, let's just turn it on and see how they go.
And these 20 other things that are happening too. Sorry about that.
Yeah. And while you're at it, come back into the office.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, let's deal with all of that, right? All of it at once.
Yeah.
Did you want to talk about the stuff that you do at Portfolio Change? And then we might wrap it up with kind of, what are the key lessons we'll learn from this?
For sure. So change portfolio management looks at all those moving parts in an organization and says, how do we lessen the impost, the collective impost of time? So impost being the tax of time we take up for people as they're undergoing change. So with CPM, change portfolio management, what we're looking at is, what is everything that's going on, and is there a smarter way? Is there a smarter way to message it, to train it, to engage people around it, to talk about it, to help people ultimately make sense of it and lessen that burden of time on their day? And so I run an intro to CPM program. I also run a neuroscience for change program, very much connected also to what we talked about today. We touched on a lot of topics.
Yeah, we have
today. Actually, it's been a fun conversation. But everything's on the website. Yeah.
The other thing that's really interesting is the way that we used to do portfolio management in change in the early days. We'd go, hey Jen, this is what I'm doing. What are you doing? Is there a way that we could maybe see if we could synergize some of this stuff together? Hey, you other random person.
Right? It's not a new concept. But now we just kind of have tools to help us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that community element, has gone away a little bit. We would just... There wasn't any formal processes. We would just go, let's just get all the people that are doing something around change together in a room once a week or even once a month or something. I can't remember the time frame. We'd just go, hey, let's just share what we're doing and see if we can help each other out.
Projects impacting the planner environment. The pipe meeting.
The pipe meeting. Yeah.
That's right.
Oh my gosh, I forgot it. We had an acronym for it. Of course we did.
Of course we did.
Acronyms for absolutely everything. Gosh, that was fun. Yeah, so that was the old school way of doing it. It's much more sophisticated. There are tools and techniques you can use to do that now.
Absolutely.
So All right, let's wrap it up for our listeners.
Fantastic. Well, great conversation.
Yeah,
today.
so much fun.
So much fun.
Yeah.
So much to unpack. We could probably talk for hours.
Yeah,
but for me, it's, think about the whole end to end, bring people along for the journey end to end. It's not just training and comms. There's engagement, there's co-design, there's process, there's gap analysis, all that needs to happen underneath that. Think about benefits, reward and recognition, ROI, and how you tie that to KPIs. But ultimately, especially if you're re-implementing or doing one for the first time, an ERP or a core system is really about rewiring your organization. So you don't undercut it, don't undersell the change, and make sure you budget for it appropriately.
Yeah, definitely. So I'd echo all of those things, particularly making sure if it's a big change, so it's an ERP, you haven't had one for a while, or you're completely redoing that, then really invest the time, because it'll pay you back tenfold if you do that up front. Showcases, walkthroughs, all of that sort of stuff, as Jen said, it's way more than training and comms. Getting people involved in it, getting them to have those little micro moments where they're learning and building their knowledge over time, that reinforcement piece is really key. And get in as early as you possibly can. So right before they've even selected the vendor. And not, can you just do a quick, to make sure this is okay, like be part of those meetings. Yes, they are boring, but be part of those meetings to understand that implication from there. And then be, as Jen and I were talking about, the advocate for the business. Be the one that says, I don't care if you don't want to do a showcase. You are doing a showcase because this is what we need to do to get the business across and do that. Stick out of your lane, go out of it, do whatever you need to do, but actually make sure that you act as that advocate for the business, because that's really, really, really critical. And then allow people the time to just get themselves used to it, get themselves comfortable with it, and kind of work that through. No one would go, a brand new system, I'm ready for it straight in day one. It's not intuitive. It's not an iPhone. It's something that they're trying to do their business around. And also make sure that all the elements end-to-end work. So you can process an order and it can actually ship to a customer. You can do an expense request that actually goes through the process, because otherwise you'll have so much cleanup at the end of it to try and make all of that work.
And if I think about my sentiments manager,
yes.
they would have saved so much money had they just invested 10% into change management to start with, rather than having to spend all of that money after the fact, re-engaging, relearning, retraining, redesigning process, and then reconfiguring the system accordingly. Yeah,
and neuroscience, is, as Jen knows super deeply, is you've got all this history that's come behind you, so you're actually looking for triggers that tell you that this is going to be exactly the same as something that's already happened before, because they've already done this ERP, they've done it poorly. Every single part of everyone's being is going to be heightened, looking for that disconnect.
Correct.
Looking for that risk associated with it. So you've got to now, not only have you got to calm that down so that you can actually deliver to that, but you've also got to deal with all of that baggage as well. So it's actually like a massive amount. Spend it up front, and then you'll save yourself in the long run.
Absolutely.
For sure. Awesome. So, we'll work out what our next topic is next.
Well, what we would love for our listeners is to suggest topics.
Yes.
We would love for you to write in and suggest some topics for us to investigate, a change crash investigation.
Yes.
and we can take it from there. But we do have an idea for our next one. But in the meantime, absolutely send us your burning questions.
And that will go kind of throughout the entire series. So we'd be very, very interested in understanding what your change crashes or near crashes. So if you think you're about to crash, that's also a good time to kind of work out what you need to do to kind of work that work. So thank you for joining us for the very first episode for Change Crash Investigators. Thank you, Jen. I love talking to you.
We could talk forever.
We could talk forever. So, and wealth of expertise, so it's always nice to have somebody that's got that similar background. We've known each other for a very long time. So,
longer than my kids, and my kids are in their 20s.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've always admired Jen, so it's always good to be able to talk to people that you admire. So anyway.
And vice versa.
Yay! Thanks. Mutual congratulations.
It's not always.
So thank you so much for joining us for First Change Crash Investigators. Hit us up with some suggestions that you want us to investigate whenever you get a chance.
Fantastic. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you. That was super fun.